Hello and welcome to TCM Sunday School again. Now, I've been really busy today packing Milo's suitcase because Milo's going to go on a little trip. So I thought you could help me to make sure that I remember everything that he's going to need. So let me show you what I've packed and then we'll put it in the suitcase. So we've got his t-shirt, he's going to need that, and his shorts, because it's going to be too hot for his dungarees, isn't it? We've got a sun hat, very important in this hot weather. Packet of tissues. And his favourite teddy bear. Sun cream, very important. And in case he gets a little bit bored, he's going to take his favourite book. Not sure he'll get very bored. And we all know that Milo likes a chocolate biscuit, don't we? So I've put one of those in for him. And of course, we don't know where Milo's going, so he might need his passport and a comb for his crazy, crazy hair. Right, so I'm going to put all these in the suitcase and I want you to make sure I've put everything in, okay? So put in the chocolate biscuit and his favourite book, his sun hat, his favourite teddy bear, not sure why he likes this one, but apparently so, packet of tissues, t-shirt, and his shorts, passport just in case, and his comb. Have I got everything in? Have I forgotten something? I forgot to put in the sun cream. Going on holiday and packing is great fun and you feel really excited. But what about if you were moving to a new place forever? What about if you knew you weren't going to come home? Have you ever had to do that, move house or move to a new area? It can be quite scary. And that's what's happening today in our story with our Bible hero. His name is Abraham, and we're going to find out his story today. Let's read in Hebrews chapter 11 about the Hall of Faith what it says about Abraham. It says in verse 8, "By faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed and set out for a place that he was going to receive as an inheritance. He went out even though he did not know where he was going." So Abraham was going to be going on a journey. And we're going to go outside and we're going to find out about what that journey was like. Now, a little point here. You might hear me call him Abraham, or you might hear me call him Abram. Originally, he was known as Abram, but later in the story, as we will discover, God's going to give him a new name called Abraham. So just remember that, because I'm not always going to remember it. So listen for the two names, but just know that he eventually is known as Abraham, which means father of many nations. Let's find out his story. So, are you ready to begin this journey with Abram? Now, he lived with his family in Ur. His father was called Terah. And one day, Terah decided to move the whole family to a new land. So they started on a really long journey. And we're going to go on that journey now. So they headed up to a place called Haran. And it was here that Abraham, or Abram, received a great promise from God. The promise you can read in Genesis. And it says, "I will make you a great nation." Remember, this is God talking to Abraham. "I will bless you. I will make your name great. And all the people of the earth will be blessed through you." Now that's some promise. I get excited if people promise me cake. But imagine receiving this as a promise. But God had something that he required of Abraham, and he would need lots of faith in order to do this. Because God asked Abraham to pack up everything and to move away from Haran, that had been his home, to somewhere entirely new. So Abraham and Sarah packed up everything that they owned and they moved to a new place. They were moving to the land of Canaan. This was part of the promise that God had made with Abraham. They arrived at a place called Shechem. And here God said to Abraham, "This is some of the land that you will one day own." Now Abraham decided at this point to set up an altar to God. An altar is something that people would lay down made of rocks as a remembrance of something special happening that God had done. They might make a sacrifice there, but ultimately they were building a reminder of God and his promises and the special things that he would do. So, Shechem, a place where Abraham made an altar. They moved on from there and they moved to the area of the Negev. They lived between the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea. They arrived here, but unfortunately they arrived at a time when there was a huge famine going on and there was no food for them, no food for their livestock and for everybody that was travelling with them. So they knew they needed to move on. So they moved to Egypt. Here they found plenty of food. Everybody had enough to eat. Now, there's a bit of a story here because Abraham had a bit of a run-in with Pharaoh, and so they had to make a sharp exit. The famine was now over, so they moved back to the Negev. Now, this is the land of Canaan. This is part of God's promise. And it's at this point that God decided to share with Abraham even more details about that promise. So we're quickly going to hop over here. I think you'll remember this story. This is the story where God said to Abraham, "Go outside and see if you can count the stars in the sky." It's a little bit tricky, and after a few tries, Abram realised that what God was trying to tell him was that he was going to have many offspring, many children. And that was a problem. Abraham had no children. How could he have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren? It just didn't make any sense. The other problem was that he was really old, and so was Sarah. Being a parent was definitely a job for the young, but Abram believed God and had faith. So, let's head back to the land of Canaan. And here, God told Abraham and Sarah that they were going to have a son. And they did. They had a son called Isaac. Now, there's a story to tell about Isaac. Now, I promised Milo that he could hear this story. So in a moment, we're going to go inside and hear about what God has to say to us through the story of Isaac. But before we do, there's one more thing. This was where Abraham died. He lived to 175. So when he was 75, he'd left Ur. So he'd spent 100 years moving around all these different paths. But finally, this was where he was buried, knowing some of the fulfillment of God's promise. And we're going to find out about Isaac right now. So they headed to the land of Canaan, and they arrived in Shechem. Now this was part of the land of Canaan, and God had promised that this was part of the land that Abraham was going to own one day. So Abraham built an altar. We read in the Old Testament that altars were used to make sacrifices on. So they would have taken a pile of rocks and built the altar. So Milo, this is the story I was telling you about to do with Isaac. Okay, so I'm going to read it to you now, so you have to listen carefully. Okay, so God knew that his secret rescue plan could only work if Abraham trusted him completely. God had to make sure Abraham would do whatever he asked. So a few years later, God asked Abraham to give him a present. Abraham liked giving presents to God. He gave God his animals. They were called sacrifices, and they were a way to say, "I love you," to God. But this time God didn't want a lamb or a goat. God wanted Abraham to give him something more, much more. He wanted Abraham to give him his son, his only son, the son he loved, Isaac. Put his boy on the altar and kill him as a sacrifice? How could God want him to do such a terrible thing? Abraham didn't understand, but he knew that God was his father who loved him, and so Abraham trusted him. Early the next morning, Abraham and Isaac set off. They climbed the steep, stony trail up the mountain, and Isaac carried the wood on his back. His father carried the knife and the coals. "Papa," Isaac said, "we have everything except we forgot the lamb for the sacrifice." "God will give us the lamb, son," Abraham said. They built an altar and laid the wood on top. Abraham asked his son to climb on top of the wood. Isaac didn't understand, but he knew his father loved him, and so he trusted him. He climbed up onto the altar, and Abraham tied his boy to the wood. Isaac didn't struggle or try to run away. He just lay there quietly and didn't make a sound. Everything was ready. Abraham took the knife. Tears were filling up in his eyes. Pain was filling up his heart. His hand was shaking. He lifted the knife high into the air. "Stop," God said. "Don't hurt the boy. I want him to live and not die. I know now that you love me because you would have given me your only son." Abraham felt his heart leap with joy. He unbound Isaac and folded him in his arms. Great sobs shook the old man's whole body. Scalding tears filled his eyes, and for a long time they stayed there like that in each other's arms, the boy and his dad. Suddenly, Abraham saw a ram caught in some brambles. The sacrifice. God had given them what they needed just in time. The ram would die, so Isaac didn't have to, and so Abraham sacrificed the ram instead of his son. And as they sat there on the mountain top, watching the embers of the fire die in the cool night air, the stars above them sparkling in the velvet sky, God helped Abraham and Isaac understand something. God wanted his people to live, not die. God wanted to rescue his people, not punish them. But they must trust him. "One day someone will be born into your family," God promised them, "and he will bring happiness to the whole world." God was getting ready to give the whole world a wonderful present. It would be God's way to tell his people, "I love you." Many years later, another son would climb another hill, carrying wood on his back. Like Isaac, he would trust his father and do what his father asked. He wouldn't struggle or run away. Who was he? God's son, his only son, the son he loved, the Lamb of God. So, Abraham has quite a story, doesn't he? He has many ups and downs on his journey with God, but throughout it all, he continues to trust in God, to believe in his promises, and to have that faith that we're looking at the moment. So, we've looked at Enoch, who walked with God. We've looked at Noah, who, motivated by godly fear, did the task that God gave him to do. And today we've looked at Abraham. He had everything he knew around him, and he was willing to give it up, to go and discover the plan that God had in store for him. even when it was going to cost him the greatest thing of all. So many things for you to think about this week as we continue to look at our Hall of Faith. Why not this week? Perhaps have a go at the suitcase game. Or you could make a giant map outside. You could make it into a treasure hunt with something to discover at the end, just like Abraham did. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you next time and discovering our next character in the Hall of Faith. Bye!